Hi, everyone. My name is Sunny. I'm so glad you could join us. This is a artist dialogue that we're having on behalf of Riaz Kavali for the theme of education, public education, and joining me in a few minutes will be Subhash Gubba, a very talented artist and a professional that lives in the Houston community. Um, but before we bring him on, I wanted to share a little bit about this project, which is using the arts as a way to activate and catalyze political dialogue, issue based um, dialogues that we can really take things that we hear on the national level, on the regional level, on the state level, and bring it down to how we, as artists, as community leaders, community members, experience these sort of things. So, with each of our dialogues, we have a corresponding video, a artistic expression that's released, and we are releasing several over the next few days. I hope you get a chance to view those. Uh, a bit of love and hard work has gone into them. Today, the topic is education. It's public education, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. Obviously, having grown up in Houston, gone to public school, and then today, also, my mom continues to be a teacher for HISD. So the theme of education was uh, important when we were in school. It continues to be important as my mom continues to teach, but also as some of us in Riyadh become parents and think about our children and the education they're going to receive. That being said, I want to introduce Subhash to the floor. He is a phenomenal artist and somebody that I've gotten to know over the last few years. He's somebody that has grown with Riaz Kavali, but is an artist in his own right. So, without further ado, let me bring him on. Hi,
Hey,
Subhash. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, good. Thanks so much for making time. I know this is a busy time. We are throwing out a lot of music. You're helping with that, and we have a interesting premiere coming up on Saturday for the Gospel and Cavalli project. So I know it's a busy time, and you're making time to do this. I appreciate it.
Oh, no worries. Happy to.
Subhash, I want to do a little bit of a formal introduction from what I just said informally, which is uh, Subhash Gubba, born um, and raised in Houston. Is that correct, Subhash?
Yeah, spent most of my life, early years in Houston. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, and has been learning and performing specifically Cavalli for 8 plus years. But
Yeah.
interestingly enough, that's not your only interaction with music. It's actually a lot deeper than that. So you start off in Karnataka, and then even before that, in your formative years, you're going to school and you're playing in band, like me, but you're playing brass instruments, so tuba and baritone, and that also you do for many many years, so 7 8 years, you're playing tuba and baritone. So. Uh, Subhash, while you're a successful professional engineer, you were also um, a musician, almost like a full-time musician. Talk to us about a little bit of that.
Yeah, I always thought that music was very similar to engineering and that type of discipline, in that you're really using all parts of your mind and body to execute on something that's just very enthralling and,
Yeah,
delivers a performance in whatever definition you want to use there. And so, I've never felt it as like, art is one part of the world that I'm like focusing on, and then engineering is another. It's all really
yeah,
equal for me. So yeah, I started off with music. My first exposure to music was in elementary school. I'd take it back to like fifth grade when we were all kind of being first exposed to, or maybe even third grade when we're being exposed to
yeah.
playing the recorder. I don't know if you ever
Oh,
had
I
to
remember that. I
deal with
remember buying one and being so excited. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly. You know, it's like this silly little flute instrument that everybody has to play, but they
That's
do a
right.
really great job of like introducing you to how to read sheet music, how to like understand tempo and
Yeah,
scales and that type of stuff. So, and then, you know, going into middle school, I decided, you know, I want to do theater or band. I ended up choosing band and it was really great. You know, I definitely one of the best decisions in my life.
yeah.
Ended up playing tuba and getting really into that. High school, we started marching band, and that culture really gave me and taught me a lot of really important skills,
Sure.
interpersonal skills, how to work in a team. So it's really all integrated.
But you know what's really interesting is that while music is a universal language, it's not all flat. It's not all the same.
Yeah,
So, even as you talk, you're really talking about being exposed and getting knowledge from many different systems of music. So, Carnatic versus Hindustani, if we're looking at in the realm of Indian classical music, uh, devotional music, if we're looking at that realm, you're looking at you singing bhajans as a kid and continue to now as well, but also now singing Qawwali. And
right.
then probably the most significant, which is when we both were introduced to the recorder, we were looking at sheet music, and Eastern
That's
music is very different than Western music in that regards. So
right.
how has that experience been in terms of your education in
Yeah.
this aspect? Formal education, what you were doing in your school versus the education you were getting outside.
Yeah, good point. So exactly, like Western sheet music, and then trying to understand like the sargam written on a piece of paper in my Carnatic
Yeah,
classes that I was taking since fourth grade, right? So for
right,
me,
right.
it was kind of parallel learning. You know, I was learning Western classical, getting better at that as I was also learning South Indian classical and Carnatic music. And I think drawing some of the parallels there, where like, you know, there's solfege over in Western, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We have
Yeah,
sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa. It was really interesting kind of seeing the similarities, but really accentuating those differences in what
yeah,
made each music unique. I think one thing we all grow up learning is, oh yeah, music is a universal language, right? But I really feel like that kind of diminishes what is really beautiful in the differences between different genres and different styles of music. You know, I would say that, you know, as a child, you know, taking some Western lessons and ideas in my music and bringing it back to my Carnatic teacher and having to kind of like tussle and kind of tug of war with, you know, oh, you're singing this the wrong way, or you're being too Western about your approach. It's always been kind of an interesting kind of duality of my different passions there, and trying to, you know, on the same side, you know, explaining some South Indian and Carnatic concepts to my teachers in band, right, and trying to help them understand, you know, where I'm coming from. It's been a really cool journey.
well, I think that's a point that I do want to expand on later in our conversation, which is, how was it growing up as a brown kid? But before we get to that and how that experience was living in West Houston,
Yeah,
what I want to first talk about is, what do you remember in terms of arts programming? Our conversation today is about education.
yeah,
Both of you and I both went to school here and grew up here. And it was cool because we were getting exposed to a lot of things that probably we weren't hearing, listening to, reading about at home.
yeah,
So when we talk about just arts programming, K through 12, do
yeah,
you remember anything in arts that was really influential for you?
yeah.
That has continued to keep an impact, or was impactful at least when you saw it immediately or experienced it then?
Yeah, you know, from the kind of early ages, elementary school, K through 5, they did what I really thought they did a good job was exposing us to different types of musics. So,
Yeah,
you know, we would do our little plays, musical theater, you know, kids getting on stage singing, albeit sometimes terribly, but they really gave us a lot of opportunities to try different art and really feel it
yeah,
out. I think that the school districts in Texas did a fantastic job with that personally, as someone who grew up in that system, in the public education system. One actual particular memory I have is when they brought in a brass quintet. and there was a
Mm.
tuba player on stage, and this was me in like third grade or first grade. And I remember looking directly at the tuba player and thinking, I'm never, ever going to play that instrument. And then lo and behold, in sixth grade, I ended up playing the tuba, which I thought was hilarious.
That's awesome.
And another thing that I really liked was kind of the interclass mingling and kind of collaboration. So they would bring sixth graders or high schoolers into the lower grades and help them teach about the upcoming opportunities like theater, band, orchestra. I thought that was a great idea because it really helped students that were older kind of showcase their art and inspire the next incoming students. I thought that was a fantastic thing that the districts did.
Yeah, I think that at least when I was growing up, um, I just was so amazed that I could go to school and there was music that I could
Yeah,
just readily get for free or something like that. Like it
right.
was like, oh my God, this is not even school. I want to be here. And
Yeah,
it's unfortunate that we are now in a position in Texas where some of this arts funding continues to be decreased every year, because that means that, the younger me, the younger you wouldn't
yeah,
have been exposed to, I ended up doing percussion. I
right.
know you went into brass, and we would have never been exposed to that. But at the same time, I will say that one thing that was clear, and it wasn't like I missed it then because I didn't expect it then.
Yeah,
But today, as an adult, what I realized was that programming was very traditional American music. It wasn't even like,
yeah,
I wasn't even exposed to jazz or gospel or
right.
anything mariachi or norteña. Like I wasn't exposed to anything that was uh, not out of the straight edge path that was there.
Yeah,
Today, I'm really excited that organizations like Mecca, organizations that are brown and black organizations, they're taking their programming into schools.
yeah,
So we can sort of, if we were
yeah.
younger, we could see that. I mean, that's kind of I love that, right?
Yeah, with at least Fort Bend ISD, which is the school district I grew up in,
Yeah, we
at
wanted
the
to talk about
time,
that. Yeah, tell me about that. Yeah.
yeah, like at the time I was going through that system, 10 plus years or probably more than 10 years ago at this point.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, it was the district was super diverse. In fact, it was at
Okay.
that time the number one diverse district in the country. So it was
Oh
a
wow.
pretty big
Okay.
deal.
Yeah.
But part of that was also because it was so sprawling. Like just because it was diverse doesn't mean it was fully integrated.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I had
Oh, so
in
you're
yeah.
telling me that it was diverse, but the programming was still not diverse, or was diverse?
Yeah, so at least the high schools. So Fort Bend ISD at that time had like 13 plus high schools, which is a huge number for a district.
Yeah.
Um, so I went to Hightower High School my first year. That was a very different kind of demographic makeup than the next 3 years at Travis High School, where I went
Yeah.
to. So at Hightower, there was a lot more African American, Hispanic populations. Our
Sure.
band played a lot more different styles of music, and they had a very different style of the black bands, the very loud and proud and aggressive approach to music in their marching, in their stand music, that type of thing. And then you come to Travis and it's a very different style. And so I did kind of see a very segmented and different, you could call it diverse but kind of separate within
Yeah.
the district, which is a problem in and of itself.
Yeah.
Having exposure and integrating different ideas and exposing people to students, especially to different ideas in music, in
Yeah.
art,
Different
is super important.
expressions.
Different
Yeah.
expressions,
Yeah.
exactly. So we had a lot more jazz influences. We had a lot more kind of historical black figures and their music in the kind of high tower world. And then over at Travis, there wasn't an emphasis placed on that. Maybe we were playing stuff that was more kind of European influence or more kind of like white American type of music. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something I thought was interesting. And then to the funding point you mentioned earlier, schools that performed the best or did the best would get more funding, which, if you think about it, maybe doesn't make sense if you're trying to
Exactly.
improve programs that are, yeah, needing that funding more.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was interesting. And throughout my time, I also saw funding cuts, budget cuts, that affected the art programs quite a bit. We lost a couple of directors almost to funding cuts. That was
Mm.
terrible. We went and petitioned to the school district. It was a whole thing.
Oh,
It
you're
was
bringing
very
up
hard.
something that happened to us. So I was
Yeah,
in percussion, right? I mentioned that,
yeah,
and and the budget cuts reminds me, we never were able to hire a percussion instructor. This guy was always like semi-contracting,
yeah.
semi-working for us, but
Tech,
not
right?
really
Yeah,
ever working for the district. And it was weird. So yeah, it was interesting. So let me ask you, I guess, Subhash, you were in a very diverse
yeah,
district. The numbers were in your favor,
yeah,
and Fort Bend ISD has good money.
yeah.
When we compare it to other districts, even in Houston. Was there a lot of brown music, brown dance, brown theater that, and specifically South Asian stuff that you were seeing, even with the diversity? Like, was that actually penetrating into your classrooms?
Good question. I think at the time that I was growing up, the South Asian population specifically, in addition to the larger Asian population, was on the up and coming. It was growing a lot. So areas
Oh, I
like
see.
Sugar Land, Missouri City, Katy,
Yeah,
obviously Katie's part of a different district, but these areas, they had a lot of brown and black people. They had a lot of Asian people in general, but it still wasn't quite, the mix that we see today and the
I
numbers
see.
that we see today.
Okay.
So I was starting to see the beginnings of like Indian clubs and like South Asian dance teams, that type of stuff. We
Yeah,
had like an Asian talent show that I got to participate in and sing in. That was really exciting.
that's
Um,
cool.
yeah, and so I would say that that diversity is still rising, but it's a lot more today
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
than we saw like 10 plus years ago.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And any memories of being a brown kid with that diversity? Um,
Yeah,
if I'm gonna put my cards out, like I grew up in Clear Lake, and there
yeah,
were some brown kids. It wasn't like there wasn't. We had a decent Asian population here, but it never sort of bled into programming. I don't think there was a lot of solidarity even within the population. Um, and At that time, I was okay with it. I was sort of assimilating in my head.
yeah.
This was the model, and I was going to try to fit there. But I'm curious, because you saw more diversity, and you were coming out, many years later than I was. How was
Yeah.
your experience?
Yeah, I grew up here. I was born here. I had to deal with a lot of issues like racism and a lot of kind of differences in opinions, religion,
Mm,
food, music, art, right?
yeah,
Like there was a lot of people that looked like me, but there wasn't always a lot of people that thought like me and were interested in the same things I was interested in. In a post to 9/11 world too, I was just in the first grade when 9/11 happened.
mm,
So I dealt with racism before 9/11, but after 9/11 it was completely different, right? Like I felt like I was constantly fighting two different personas, the brown people that kind of hated being brown, because I love being brown. There's so much richness to our culture and so much
yeah,
excitement, so many things to share. And then I was
yeah,
also fighting another population, which was people that just hated brown people in general. So how that kind of manifested in my day to day, in my upbringing, and it later on in art and things like that, right? Like I found kind of a way to kind of collaborate in art and sort of showcase, there's a lot of cool things in brown culture that you might be able to relate to in
yeah,
Western culture through art, right? But
yeah,
at the same time, there was a bit of an othering that did happen throughout that experience. But I feel like a lot of that is improving lately in some ways. Obviously, there's still a lot of Islamophobia, a lot of Asian hate that has come up with more recent issues.
yeah,
But overall, and part of that might be just because I'm older and I'm with an older crowd, a more mature crowd now.
yeah,
It's been interesting to kind of see that grow.
yeah. And I think that what's unfortunate is that um, we still have pockets of population that are trying to separate us based on the way we pray or languages
Yeah.
or skin color, um, and not to mention that there's also a discrimination within the brown population.
Yeah.
I love what you said, which is like there were people who looked like me, but they didn't think like me. And to me, like you probably meant a broader point here. To me, that reminds me of the fact that the South Asian population, even if you have 10 brown guys in the
Yeah.
room, well, South Asia is 9 countries,
Right.
hundreds of languages,
Yeah.
many faiths. So you're bound to have very different experiences that come.
Right.
Um, and so, others may put you in the same box, but, it's very different even in that box.
Right. And I think even being within that box, what's helpful to remember to kind of promote some of that unity is like we have all these other struggles that are we have in common, even with some of the people that kind of oppose us. If we can focus on the fact that we share these struggles, you end up realizing that the things that really matter the most are what kind of unites us.
Yeah.
And so just like that, how music is a universal language concept kind of comes into play, right? It's like in a way, the struggles we share is kind of a universal language, and we should focus on how we can help each other through that and how we're more alike than we seem, but our differences shouldn't divide us. They should be highlighted and seen as beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, we as a society have to recognize that, world geography and world history, while they were fantastic,
Yeah.
those are the only exposures to Hinduism, Sikhism, Islam,
Yeah.
um, Judaism that you really have, um, living in this country where we experience a lot more sort of familiarity with Christian expression. And
Yeah.
so, yes, I think Islamophobia is a real problem, but so is the lack of knowledge that we have with Hinduism and Sikhism and Jainism and
Absolutely.
Buddhism.
Yeah.
Um, and that makes us weaker. I feel like, that reduces our intellect. And as we think about, the education system, I worry about that. So one of
Yeah.
the things that I loved about Houston was it was diverse. But the second thing that I've loved about Houston more recently is that diversity is really coming up in positions of power, and they're trying to make sure that it's seen.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the beginning of the year, we had the state of Texas who took over HISD, and you and I have talked about this privately,
Yeah.
and we'll leave the long hour-long conversations aside to just, my last question to you: what do you think about that? Um, the state of Texas coming in um, with the history of HISD being, first of all, a really huge district.
Yeah.
You were talking about 10 or 11 15 high schools. HISD has a lot of high schools, and it has a lot of teachers. And so some of those were not doing well, perhaps because of lack of resources. And
Yeah.
instead of investing in those, um, you continued investing. And you made this point too. You keep on investing in the winners. And it's like you're not running a sales team, man. You're not like,
Yeah.
this is public education. So you need to invest in folks who are not doing well because there's something missing. Um,
Exactly.
so I don't know. I just threw a lot out there at you, but
Yeah.
question remains, which is, what do you think about the takeover, and what can we do as a community, as South Asians who care about the education system? We care about the kind of education our kids get, and how can we get that sort of back in control?
Yeah, it's a big topic, right? Like I think growing up in the public education system in the greater Houston area, and I have a lot of friends that were in other districts as well,
Yeah.
HISD included. There's always been a trend of, at least throughout the time that I was growing up, there was a trend of trying to fight the powers that be that were trying to mute certain perspectives, certain minority opinions, ideologies, histories. I grew up in school learning about South Asia in my world history class, and they boiled it down to literally three things, which was like the caste system and the Aryan invasion theory and British influence. And that's it. Like there's so much more to learn there. There's so much more to teach there. And I spent a lot of my own personal time battling that as a student, like saying this is not an accurate representation of where my family comes from.
Yeah.
We're perpetuating these ideas, these simplistic takes on stuff that just is going to hurt communities overall, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of that kind of pushback from people on kind of my side, if you will,
Yeah.
over the years that I was in school. And I think in the recent few years, right, a lot of my peers have become teachers and school psychologists in these districts. And what they're seeing now is that trend is now being reversed, and there's another pushback, which is to kind of mute these perspectives further, remove certain topics from textbooks. And I
Mm.
feel like certain administrations and their agendas are taking over, and we're losing a lot of the progress we've made over the last decade or so
Yeah.
in fixing the textbooks and fixing the curriculum.
It's
And I
like
think,
we need more, not less, right? It's like
yeah,
don't remove things, like add more context, add more. What are
exactly.
you doing? Like taking more things away. Like I love what you said. Like you can't erase history. Like
Yeah. And like the people who suffer the most are the people that are in the minority, the underprivileged populations, the disadvantaged communities that already don't have the proper representation. And unfortunately, I don't see that improving anytime in the very near future. Hopefully if we get out there and we vote, we voice our concerns to our representatives, we elect the people that are going to do the right thing.
yeah,
That's the power that we have. And so, I definitely encourage everyone around me to register to vote, go vote. Obviously, the registration deadline is passed, but if you're able and willing to vote, make make the effort. It's the only way we can really change the current trend, which is, I think, downhill, and it's not good. And I
I
do feel like our curriculum is very much kind of centered around things that kind of make the most money or highlight the most kind of ideals. So, for example, sports culture is huge in this country,
yeah.
and that trickles down into education K through 12. So now football is big, and that's the only reason band gets funding. It's because football is big, right? So we need to kind of change that from the ground up, I'd say.
Yeah, I think there's so much of what you said that I resonate with, and I think voting is so crucial to this
Yeah,
because we have to show up. For us to have dialogue is not enough. In our communities, you and I have both sat where uncles and aunties have talked to death about a political topic or a oppressive behavior. But then when it comes to actually making a change, it doesn't
yeah,
happen. Election day and this sort of election is so important because this is a local election. You
yeah,
know, we all go towards the presidential election because we think that's the big thing that's going to matter. But the mayor of Houston, that's who's going to impact
yeah,
many of our fathers, many of our small businesses, and it's going to impact our jobs, and it's going to be impact who comes to this city in terms of employers.
yeah,
What kind of industries are we going to continue welcoming, and which ones are we going to stop funding in the same level? So I think so much of that is important. But the other thing I wanted to highlight is that this is just one way of showing up,
yeah,
voting. The other way of showing up is recognizing that there are other non traditional professions that
yeah.
we have to show up for.
Right.
So, part of the reason that Hinduism is blocked down to the three things, or India is blocked down to three things: caste, British invasion, Aryan, um, uh, 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 is because you don't have South Asians doing this work. This is the problem that
Yeah.
Subhash and I have actually experienced with Cavalli as well. For a time, there were folks who were perhaps uh, married to South Asians or had access to South Asians, and were talking and writing about Cavalli.
Exactly.
But the
Ex-
experience is very different when you are South Asian. The realities of what you are able to access and what you are able to see when you don't come in with the privilege
Yeah,
needs to be recognized, and that's part of what will help in diffusing the hatred that exists in our country, right? When we have
yeah,
real perspectives talking about, hey, this is the ground reality and stuff. So
exactly. And I
yeah,
think like the dialogue that Cavalli provides, right, is very much that. It's
yeah,
always been a dialogue of oneness and collaboration and looking beyond our differences and seeing how we can help our communities. I think that if the education system today would call upon different people in different communities to come and talk at schools and actually interact with the youth and give them these other perspectives that isn't just filtered down or put into a textbook, it would really do a lot. And I think as community members ourselves, the two biggest things we can do is vote and volunteer. And so giving your time, giving your vote, these are the things we can do the easiest, and it's going to make the most impact, I would say.
I love that. Thank you. That is a beautiful ending. Subhash Gubba, my friend and a fellow Houstonian. Thank you so much for your time, Subhash. Look forward to the concert on Saturday, which
Yep.
is happening at U of H, and please, both of us are going to vote. Um, Either early voting, which happens and is going to, I think tomorrow's the last day for early voting, and then
Yeah.
Tuesday if you can't vote. Again, thank you, Subhash.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Everybody take care. Go vote.
Thanks.
See
Bye
ya.
bye. Everyone, I'm going to just leave you with election dates. Remember, if you have a mail in ballot, that needs to be postmarked by um, election day on Tuesday. So, last day for early voting is this Friday, and then election day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday. Thank you all very much. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.